Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today I'm going to be talking about some of my favourite canon Star Wars novels. And this is just something that I kind of wanted to do ever since I started doing some Star Wars stuff on here, because I have really enjoyed reading a lot of the canon novels since 2013. And here I just want to talk about them, and this is 5 canon novels, the 5 that have made the biggest impression on me. This isn't a ranking or anything like that. I'm going to be talking about them in chronological order. So, I'm not saying, okay, the last one I talk about is the best or anything like that. This is just my 5 favourite ones so far. And obviously then it will work as recommendations if you're maybe someone who enjoys the films but haven't really dipped into the expanded universe or anything like that. Then this is something for you. And yes, I am specifically going with canon novels, i.e. everything that's been published since the Disney buyout in 2013, because Legends, I've read bits and pieces, but it's a lot more sketchy than my experience with the canon stuff. And I will be talking about the story of these novels, however, it's nothing that you won't be able to see just by reading the blurb or like an online description of it. So there aren't going to be any spoilers or anything like that here because, well, this is there mainly for people who maybe haven't read any books. And this is sort of recommendations for other people to maybe get into the expanded universe a little bit. And I'll start with what is probably the obvious choice, and that is Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. Thrawn's obviously a legendary character within the Star Wars expanded universe, as is Timothy Zahn, an author, obviously best known for writing stuff with Thrawn in. And after his reintroduction into the new canon with Star Wars Rebels, it was nice that Timothy Zahn came back and wrote some stuff for him in the new canon. And this tells the story of Thrawn's first contact with the Empire and how he kind of rises through the ranks before eventually becoming Grand Admiral, as well as showing some of his first meetings with very significant characters that I won't say exactly, but I mean, they're fairly obvious. And Timothy Zahn obviously knows how to write for Thrawn brilliantly. His kind of cold and calculating, objectivist view of the world, where everything's just about the plan and how to get things done efficiently and all that, it really does shine through on these pages. But the thing that surprised me about this book was the character of Eli Vanto, who is really the main character of the novel. It's largely told from his perspective, and he's the person that we kind of see Thrawn through. He's a young aspiring Imperial officer who's basically assigned to look after Thrawn because they speak the same language. And he's really good. I really enjoyed seeing him. He's basically the person who suffers because of the racism and prejudice that's against Thrawn as an alien coming into the Empire. But because Thrawn is untouchable, because he's so good, Eli Vanto's the one who kind of gets punished for it. But the two bounce off each other really well, and having them both there kind of helps us to understand a little bit more of what Thrawn's about, especially for someone who doesn't know about Thrawn or anything like that going in. So whether you are already a fan of the Thrawn stuff from the Legends, or if you've never heard of him, or whether you've only seen him in Rebels or something like that, this is definitely a good one to go to. He's a really interesting character to get into, and this book does a good job of reintroducing him to the new canon. Now, the second book on this list was actually the first canon novel that I read, and that's Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. You're going to see her name a lot here. And this was really what pushed me on to read further novels, because as I said, I'd read some Legends stuff, but not a huge amount. It's because it was just kind of, oh, well, that's a Star Wars thing. I guess I'll pick that up and have a look at it. I was never kind of collecting them or anything like that. But Lost Stars kind of inspired me to do that with the new canon. And in this book, we have the story of 2 friends, Thane and Sierra. And it's their journeys from childhood as sort of childhood friends into the Empire, and then eventually one of them breaking off and joining the rebellion. Basically, friends caught on opposite sides of the war. It's an interesting thing that surprisingly hasn't really been done that much in the films or TV shows that much or anything. So it's nice to see it here in the novel. And both characters are given equal weighting in the story, and I think the book does a really good job of making us understand why each character goes the way that they do. Because the thing is the person who goes with the Empire isn't head over heels in love with the Empire. Equally, the person who goes to the rebellion isn't that idealistically involved in it. It's just reasons why ordinary people might choose either side. And it gives a good shining light onto why two good people and good friends would end up fighting against each other in a war like this. And yeah, the EU has tried to kind of humanize the Empire a little bit, and I think this is definitely one of the better efforts. And Claudia Gray, I think, is probably the most gifted new Star Wars writer. She's done such a great job with basically every project she's been given, and this is definitely a good one. I would recommend this as a first starter. If you haven't really read anything before, I think Lost Stars is a really good way to get into it, because it's not like too heavy on lore or anything like that. It's just a story in the Star Wars universe that all you really need to know is what happened in the original trilogy, and that's it. And then the next one really did surprise me. This is Rebel Rising, written by Beth Revis. Going into this book was interesting because it's obviously a book that's very centered around Rogue One. With each of the films that have come out so far since Disney bought out Lucasfilm, they've released a few companion books that might give a little bit of backstory or shine a light onto one of the side characters or something, and this was one of those for Rogue One. And Rogue One, if you've seen my ranking of Star Wars films, is not a film that I particularly care for. And of all the modern Star Wars films, Rogue One is my least favourite, so I was not expecting much from this book. And this really tells the story of Jyn Erso's life from the prologue of Rogue One up to the rest of the film. But I found Jyn's characterization to be way better in this book than it ever was in the film. I cared about her so much more here than I did in the film where she was the main character. As we see her journey originally with Saw Gerrera's rebels, and then kind of explaining why she was firstly sort of believing in that, and then why she eventually left it, to become the more selfish and cynical character that she is in the film. And that's really where this novel shines for me. I don't have that much to say about it. I just thought this was a really good take on a character that I didn't really like that much in the film. Rogue One's biggest problem for me was that when all of the main characters died, I didn't really care about any of them, and this book certainly went away to making me care about Jyn Erso. And that's the best recommendation I can really give for it. So next, it's a Leia book. Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. And this book focuses on Leia's teenage years as she basically became involved in the rebellion a bit more, as well as how her kind of idealistic approach to everything from the original trilogy stood up, as well as her kind of stubbornness and everything, how that kind of grew and blossomed. In a way, it does for Leia what Solo was trying to do for Han Solo, but I think here it just works so much better as a novel, and it's not just there to fill in some checklist of things that, oh, well, we know Leia did this, we know Leia did this. This is just pretty much a new story. It does introduce Holdo, who would obviously be a character in The Last Jedi, and she's fun and everything here. But of course it is the shining light on Leia that makes me like this the most. It's her desperation to do the right thing that always kind of makes me like her, and honestly, if I had to say a single favourite Star Wars character across the films and the books and everything, I would say Leia. And I think it's just because she might make mistakes, but it's always for the right reason. She's strong-willed and opinionated, but what she's doing is really just because she thinks it's the right thing to do. It is a fairly short novel, but it has everything in it that you could possibly wish. But yeah, this really did make an impression on me, and it was after reading this book when I kind of thought about it and was like, yeah, I think Leia probably is my favourite Star Wars character. And speaking of Leia, this is probably my favourite canon novel that we're going to go to now, and that is Bloodline by Claudia Gray. This book is set a few years before The Force Awakens. It's not clear exactly how long, but at this point the New Republic is still standing strong. Leia is a senator in the New Republic. Ben Solo is off training with Luke. Han and Leia are still married. All the stuff is kind of established almost sort of as it was before things started going bad in the build up to The Force Awakens. And this is kind of sowing the seeds for the First Order and all that kind of stuff. It is quite political. A lot of the novel centres around Leia's growing relationship with Ransolm Casterfo, who is a rival senator for the other side, with the political split in the Senate between the populists, which in this universe means people who think that each planet should kind of be able to govern itself, and then you just have the New Republic kind of overseeing stuff. And then the centrists, who kind of believe the opposite. They think that the Republic should be very strong and have a lot of control over everything. And generally you tend to find that the centrists were from planets that were more in favour of the Empire in the past. And equally, a lot of the centrists may end up joining the First Order later on. And I think this complements Princess of Alderaan quite well, because while that does a good job of kind of showing how Leia got politically involved and how she got involved in the rebellion and all that, this shows why she restarted the whole process of doing a rebellion, or in this case a resistance, against the First Order and the threat that it was starting to bring up, as well as actually paying off one of the things that was kind of left hanging in the original trilogy, and that is Leia is Darth Vader's daughter. A lot is made of the fact that Luke is his son, but Leia is his daughter, and that has an impact in this novel. This is partly about her coming to terms with that. This is an underexplored era of the new canon, I think. Most stuff is either around The Force Awakens or around the original trilogy. There's not that much between at the moment, or at least post Battle of Jakku, there's not that much between. And this does a great job of setting things in motion, as well as developing Leia's character and how she grew from where she was at the end of Return of the Jedi up to where she was at the start of The Force Awakens. And this is definitely the best canon novel that I have read so far. So that's it. Those are my 5 favourite canon novels. I said it wasn't a ranking, but the last one ended up being the best anyway. Well, that's just the way that it worked chronologically. But really, on the whole, I would say the track record of the new canon has been really, really good. There have been a couple of duds, but for the most part, most of them have at least been somewhat enjoyable, and some of them have been really good and offered a great insight. And as the canon novels appear to be starting to move away from the original trilogy era that a lot of them are kind of set around, we've got a couple of prequel era ones coming out next year, including one written by Claudia Gray about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan that I'm very excited for. But this is such a great foundation, these books here. Some of them are so good. So if you're a fan of Star Wars, any of these 5 are great. And if you're someone who has also read a lot of the books, maybe you've got another one that you really liked, and if you want to leave a recommendation in the comments, then feel free. And you know, all the other stuff, please like this video if you did, and if you liked it, then check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you for watching.